2 points really touched me what's through this conversation. The first is around that what Spring said about this heart connection. She has faith in heart connection will be the agent to heal the world, heal humanity, and that support the transformation and evolution of humanity. Really touched me and made me ask myself, how much am I cultivating my heart quality to even approach the consciousness transformation, in approaching my work, to bring this transformation in everyday life and with my work, in consulting, in educating work with the wider world. And her experience of, one key quality, key competence, one of the key competences of doing that is that's what she mentioned about suspending the mental narrative. And I feel that very touching, even with her in-laws and family. And it's so much, it's part of own self-work we have to do in order to be able to bring the consciousness alive into that connection. And I see that parallel with a lot of activist work. Is before we go into, before we know, we enter into that part of we versus them, right and wrong, binary approach. So, and changing others. So it reminds me of more deepen the inner work. What she talked about it is her lab now, new lab on inner climate. And the second point that really inspired is what she was saying, that the system itself, it's not right and wrong. There's really this distinction on reductionist approach to system transformation. It's not by reducing that and coming to something else, something was wrong. It's really natural evolution that industrial world was needed in the total evolution of humanity, and how can we grow through it rather than rejecting. And that systemic approach is so in parallel with our individual transformation, that there are aspects in us cannot be rejected in order to grow new consciousness, but rather to include it, all parts that in our culture was deemed dark, not okay, whatever the dominant culture. And that needs to also be included with compassion, and from there going through it and transcend it, so transform. So those are the 2 points I saw, both the parallel individual work I need to do, but also how that work projects into systemic work, how we apply that exactly in the outer work. And therefore transformation starts again from inside of ourselves.
Yeah, I'm first of all really thrilled that I made it to this call. I think something about the bridging really caught my attention, and I really resonate with when Spring described the whole aspect of isolation. That was actually the subject of my presentation also, incidentally. And I feel it is such critical work. So glad that we are doing a follow-up on this subject, addressing the aspect of polarization, which Charles Eisenstein has been talking about. It's the most critical work we can be doing at this moment, is building these bridges. I felt this kind of disconnect that we discussed today on our call today at the Parliament of World Religions, where 7,000 people flew in from all over the world to attend that conference, and there were plastics everywhere. And I didn't know what to think, what to say, what to feel. And, there was a track on climate change. And I did stand up and I did say that, well, what is the meaning of this conference? What are we doing here? And I felt that again in Findhorn when I was talking to my newly made German friend who had cycled all the way from Germany for a month to get to Findhorn. And she stayed there, and it really got me thinking about my own choices, especially because I have been in a situation where I have not been able to travel for the last few years. And I had decided that I am now going to be spending a good chunk of my time traveling to learn new experiences. And, like Spring said, some of these events can be life-changing. And that really put a big question mark in my mind as to what did I do? Did I make the wrong choice, or is it okay to fly? And really, when I came back and I started reflecting on it, and also hearing what Laurie, you were saying about your thoughts on how you feel about getting into the plane, it seems to me that the most important work that is to be done is really to embody the interbeing and the interconnectedness, not just with each other and other forms of life, but even with the things that are out there, the trash, the plastics, the planes, the fuel. It is all part of who we are, and we are all connected. And the moment we embrace that and we realize that this is all part of us, it has been created as a result of what we have done, and take that ownership, I feel not so bad about it. And I do feel moved to then get up, go ahead and do something, have more such bridging conversations. And it really all boils down to having compassion for myself when I am not able to forgive the other person for exhibiting behaviors which I find are not really helping the climate situation. And also compassion for the other person. Maybe that person is an employee of an oil company and has no intention of spoiling the climate. That person just wants to make a living to support his family. So having compassion for that person, and not look at everybody who's into anything to do with plastics or oil with that kind of a scorn and hatred. So I just felt it is like really the most critical dialogue that we could be having in the space of climate change today. And I'm really grateful that we have picked this up and we have chosen to have this conversation. Thank you.
Oh, what a rich exchange. I lit up at many points, connecting from my own experience personally through my life, and in hearing from each of you, and also from the what happened at the conference and exchanges there. There's so much. As a person who grew up in the Midwest of the United States, very conservative place, I resonated with that way. I have always felt a little out of place and felt like a bridger, bringing in other perspectives, and had always sought from early on the sort of other cultures' ways of recognizing our interbeing. And so that was what I studied in college. It's what I was involved in different ways. And philosophy, psychology, religion, mysticism, and practices of different faiths. And for instance, staying in relationship with my mother. And I will just give an example of recent conversation with my family this last couple of weeks. 3 generations. My niece's husband, who is about 35 and very different sort of background, close to the land, but very conservative, and went into the army, and his perspectives of fighting for our freedom. With a conversation with him and my mother, who has gotten more and more conservative over the years, really likes Fox News, and we've had difficult conversations before, my sisters and I and all of us, bringing to light how staid views will keep us in conflict, and how can we get under or back out of those views and remember the root of what connects us, and not only from our history and our bloodline and marriage and all that, what brings us together as family, but as human family, how can we be together in ways that are more generative? And we have the little one, a little 5-year-old, you know, we're being with, and who reminds us of the boundaryless ways of love. So always feeling like a bridger. I felt very fortunate to be able to go to the conference. At first, I did not want to go. I did not want to fly. I was feeling like I'd been flying too much. I hadn't done travel much in my life, but in recent years, for training purposes, I have. And I was going to not go to that conference. I was just, okay, enough travel with the planes and expense and all that. But I felt called to go. Why? I did not know why, but I felt very strongly in my body called to go and listen to that. I'm listening more and more to that. And one of the gifts was to be able to be housed in the same house as some of the indigenous folks and hang out with them and hear their perspective and be there to listen as a listening presence and learn from them. And also in this transformation and death, I resonated also with that, being able to accept death as a part of evolution. Personally, after 36 years of marriage, just in January, signed off on a divorce. This was not an easy evolution, but it was natural, and I had to at some point let go of my idea of how things would go on, which was not healthy. And so very personally, living through that death and allowing new life to bubble up, and then going to this conference was part of that new life too. I just see, you know, the ability to share with people from different realms as something we're still feeling our way into, and we can, it's right at home with our own families, right where we are, where, for instance, in Louisville, a conservative place, I'm connecting with people in growing an orchard and gardens and things like that, something we can all share, something we do all share. And there are so many ways, and I'm glad for this conference weaving to be able to connect with people and continue to explore this. There's so many other highlights of that conversation that I won't be able to get to, but the multidimensionality, for instance, as Laurie mentioned with the Kabbalah and Taoism, and so many experiential ways of the earth, the universe, the heart, and the mind with each other, our conscious ways of being. It just does feel like gathering in circles like this, even if we don't really know what we're talking about, but this talking and this sharing is a way of opening us, So thank you.
I just want to touch with what Spring said about this accepting and grieving and being able to, to accept that we're going to die as an important part of the process. And I just want to say is that it's taken me a bit of time to get to that, but I've been developing sort of 12 steps of a healing process. And I work with people with cancer, for instance, and I help them to heal. And they, of course, everybody's, hoping that they're going to heal. And then they get to stage 4, and the doctor says, you haven't got a hope in hell, in 6 weeks you're going to be dead. So you should start preparing. And that's it's almost as if Gaia has got cancer, and we're the cancer cells, and Gaia is about stage 4, when you look at it in terms of actually how serious this situation is. And one of the stages that I feel that we have to go through is that deep acceptance that we're heading for extinction. We are going to die. And I belong to a number of groups. They they're at that kind of level. They're accepting that near-term extinction is going to come. We're going to die. And they say, there's no hope. We're not allowed to have any hope at all. We just accept it. Okay. And then I realized that's the time to grieve. So we go into that deep grief is we're all going to die. The wonderful planet, Gaia is going to die. It's awful. Okay. But once you've gone through that grief and you've given up hope and you've accepted the situation, then all sorts of infinite possibilities open up. Okay, it's a wonderful thing. And what I found with the cancer is when they go through that, they let go of everything and they totally surrender. That's the point where they can actually go towards radical remission, total healing. Okay, and that's the magic. So in a sense, this is kind of one of the stages that we have to go through in order to get to acceptance, and then to go to deep acceptance, and then to go to radical acceptance, and then to go to radical inner transformation, and then radical outer transformation. And eventually we could get to living on heaven on earth. We could have actually healed this problem, and we could have resolved it, and we could be living harmoniously together. So there's that. When I look at the chances today, I see 99% chance we're heading for extinction. We haven't got much of a hope in hell, but there's a 1% chance that we will actually do those things that I'm talking about, that we can actually get there. So that's where I put all my energy in, is helping people to go through those 12 stages in order to be able to, for that we could get through this, as you say, this civilization is dying and an eco-civilization is emerging, maybe, if we're lucky. And we could live in a wonderful planet together if we just went through that process. And the way to do it is all there. It's dead easy. So the processes are really easy. And that's, most people don't know how to do it, but that's kind of what gives me total hope. Anyway, that's my little bit. So thank you, Spring, for actually mentioning that. That encouraged me, because I thought maybe I was a little bit off track on that thought, but you've confirmed that that's going in the right direction. Thank you.
Yes, so yeah, fascinating listening to this many perspectives. Also, you talking in the end, and I really feel like that also I get the vision in my mind that we really are a type of society dying, and the imagery of the caterpillar nest that Nora Bateson talks about in several talks I heard just the last year with her, says that we don't really know what the butterfly stage of us are, but in fact the way society are now is dying. It can't continue, but we just have to aim for that little needle eye where we get through on the other side alive, living. And I think the way progress, the way we have destroyed everything for us so far is the only way we could have done it this fast. Because if we had slower progress in history and slower science, we wouldn't have the capacity to change fast enough when something bad would eventually happen to us. Anyways, we are a fantastic species with a fantastic ability, and we have a global communication tool like we're using right now, the internet, that is mind blowing. If you go back and explain this to people 50 years ago, they wouldn't have believed us, and they couldn't. And people who saw the problem of population growth and pollution back then, they wouldn't have figured out that this was actually a way to solve it. A global communication tool where we can talk to each other instantly all over the world, and we just have to really experiment with this as fast as we can during the coming couple of years, and we will figure something out. Because the stuff we're doing here together now, I couldn't even dream about this 10 years ago, doing things like this video conference, and if that was unimaginable, things we will do in 5 years to actually come together as a global species, we can't imagine today. But we have to continue. People like us had to continue to do the hard work of actually doing the experiment, and I think we're gonna get through. So that's my and of course there's the other choice is laying down at the ground and dying, and or like you said, it's 1999, and those two are not the options I choose. So, yeah, thank you.
So yeah, I'd love to share a few thoughts. The first are actually just some resources that I've thought about over the course of this call. One is a website called Great Transition Stories. It's greattransitionstories.org, and it's on the annotated resource list that we have. And it's a compilation of all kinds of different metaphors and other framings for transformation that includes the idea of humanity giving birth to something new, or humanity growing up and moving out of adolescence into adulthood, and the butterfly metamorphosis story is also there, and a lot of different resources around who's been telling these stories and how. So there's that. There's a little piece that I wrote on the butterfly metamorphosis metaphor some time ago that I just put in the chat, and I'll put that into the list. Hopefully I'll remember the resource list as well. And then there's a wonderful film called Albatross. When I think, Kong, you were talking about plastic. Someone was talking about plastic and intervening with that. And this movie is not just about plastic pollution and its impact on the birds. And
I met him. He's from Seattle. He did
yes,
this wonderful.
Yeah, Chris. Forgetting his last name, but yeah, an artist who made this film. Very powerful.
Chris Johnstone.
Jordan, and you can stream it online, and you can stream it in theaters. It's got a grant to make it available. Albatross, the film. It's a meditation ultimately on grief and love and beauty and man's connection and disconnection with the natural world. I was, I resonated with so much of what you all said in the beginning. Laurie, when you were talking about the distinctions between feelings and judgments, and then Spring kind of picking up on that before and kind of naming the difference between sort of just an authentic experience of what we feel versus going into this othering and judgment and criticism of people. And that shows up for me. It's one of my own internal challenges, to be sure. I liked hearing that, I need to be compassionate and forgive myself for not forgiving others and judging them. And I wonder underneath that about theories of change. What struck me is, okay, the premise of this conversation is you two, had there was some kind of gap you're bridging in your paradigms, and yet for the most part, I heard a lot of alignment, and so I had to kind of read between the lines a little bit to guess, well, is there a disconnect? That seems almost too harsh a word, but where's the bridging needed? And I wonder if it shows up in terms of how you each choose not only to engage for yourselves in the world, but what your theory is for what is needed in the wider world in order for this shift to happen, and where we prioritize our efforts. If you had, the ability to, without being a fanatic, I love the Amos Oz quote, to change people's behavior, what would you point them towards? And maybe that's where there would be a very different set of things you might prioritize. Although you both talked about, working more locally. Well, Spring, for you, it's the inner climate. Laurie, you talked about working at the local level in Oxford. I don't know. I have a curiosity about that. The last two things I'll say are just, that I think in the importance of the bridging conversations was, another lovely theme, and you talked about, Spring, your family, and in the course of these dialogues there have been others, and I connect that up now in terms of the work. Yes, there are the crises and averting those, and if it's a 99% chance we don't, or whoever knows, I certainly it's not zero, then, Michael, that we don't make it. What's that look like? And I have really strong fears of civil unrest, and worse. And so I think these bridging conversations with our neighbors seem more and more relevant to me, and necessary, that kind of connecting. And I'll just close with another quick story that ties back into the original sort of a lot of the themes around metrics and how we create change and theories of change. There's a woman professor at Tufts University, Neva Goodwin, who's one of the leading thinkers on sustainability and socially responsible investing, and how do we re-engineer the financial system in particular as a leverage point for change. And she's worked on this for decades. And at a recent meeting in the fall of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which sponsored the NESI Forum that we partnered with here, she said she used to think that was the trim tab, this metaphor that Bucky Fuller uses for how to shift a system. And she doesn't believe that anymore. And she's not even sure she believes that there are trim tabs, really, that metaphor works for global change. And then she said, but, sometimes lately I've been wondering if maybe, just maybe, that trim tab for change is despair. Which I think goes straight to the points you made here so powerfully about accepting the dying and that being necessary. With that, I bring it back to you two, Spring and Laurie, for final comments.
Well, well, it was very gratifying for me to hear the reflection afterwards. A lot of echo. So Ben, your question about where are the differences, disparities between me and Laurie, I think you are right. It's more of a part of if we allow ourselves to be fanatics, what would you, if someone asks me, if you were the queen or the king of the world, what would you do? I think probably we will have a different imaginary scenarios of, but fortunately neither of us have that power. But that imagination captures one aspect, one dimension. We're multidimensional beings, so that imagination captures one dimension of ourselves, and I think that's where me and Laurie met. Is our imagination are dancing with each other. This is very, very gratifying. Makes me wanting more. So, thank you all.
Thank you, Spring. Yeah, I think there's, in terms as far as our conversation is concerned, and this is the third conversation we've had, I guess, and I feel like maybe we've already done a lot of knocking the rough edges off perceived differences. So actually we kind of know that we're coming from the same place.
Yeah, this is the polished version already.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for beautiful sharing. And Michelle, I'm sorry I missed part of yours, and I came in at what felt like quite a tender moment in yours, and I I think there was just one thing that stood out for me that I feel like I want to share still, which is it's to do with, I hear a lot of people saying we need theories of change, we need stories of change. And I'm conscious of that desire to, there's almost a desire to know the future. So in Britain, Jem Bendell, who's come out very strongly saying the end is coming, prepare to die, is being treated as a bit of a guru. And I think there's almost a kind of grasping that certainty as, which people really want. And actually, and maybe this goes back for me to having a physics training, that I kind of know that, stories are always provisional. My ability to know what's going on, it's always provisional. And I guess I feel, for me, quite strongly that the kind of theories of change and outcome focus and that kind of thing is just, for me, it just doesn't work for me. I need, the work for me is to try and it's just work on being able to take the next step, actually. What feels right to do now? How does it feel right to respond now? How can I make it more mindful so that it's flowing from the right place. And sorry, I'll give you another quote that I love, that I is amazing, is T.S. Eliot. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the line from the Four Quartets. I said to my heart, be still and wait without hope, for hope would be hope for the wrong thing. And I can't know. So thank you anyway for this good time. And I would love to do more. I hope Spring and I will have more conversations anyway, and it would be lovely to have more of these kind of sharings.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ben, for providing this.
It's an honor.